Human janitor helped a starving alien child. Next day, 300 spaceships lined up outside his house. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The evening sky over Millfield had turned an unusual shade of purple, but Blake Turner was too tired to notice. After 15 years of cleaning the same high school corridors, all he wanted was to get home to his empty house and microwave dinner. Blake locked the utility closet with practiced efficiency, his weathered hands moving automatically through the motions he'd performed thousands of times. At 45, his brown hair had begun graying at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened considerably over the past few years. Ever since his wife Sarah had passed away from cancer 3 years ago, those lines seemed to multiply faster. Another day, another dollar, he muttered to himself, a phrase his father had used throughout his own blue-collar life. Blake shouldered his worn backpack and headed toward the staff exit, his footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. As he crossed the parking lot toward his decade-old pickup truck, something caught his eye. A faint bluish glow emanated from behind the dumpsters at the far end of the lot. Probably kids messing around with their phones, he thought. Or maybe someone had dumped an old computer monitor. Either way, as head custodian, it was his responsibility to check it out. Hello? Anyone there? Blake called as he approached. The glow intensified, pulsing rhythmically. School properties closed after hours. A soft whimpering sound responded to his call. It wasn't quite human, more like the sound a puppy might make if it were trying to speak. Blake's heart rate quickened. He'd heard about the strange occurrences happening around town lately. Unusual lights in the sky, electronic devices malfunctioning, livestock acting strangely, but he'd dismissed them as small-town hysteria. "Hey, you okay back there?" he asked, his voice gentler now. He rounded the corner of the dumpster and froze. Huddled against the wall was a small figure, no larger than a human child. But this was definitely not human. Its skin was a translucent blue that seemed to glow from within, pulsating with each shallow breath. Large, almond-shaped eyes dominated a delicate face, and instead of hair, a crest of what looked like crystalline structures adorned its head. The creature looked up at Blake, and he felt a jolt of something. Not fear, exactly, but a profound sense that he was witnessing something that would change everything. The alien's eyes were deep pools of swirling indigo, and within them, Blake saw unmistakable emotions: fear, exhaustion, and hunger. "Holy shit," Blake whispered, taking an involuntary step backward. You're not from around here, are you?" The creature made another sound, more urgent this time, and clutched at its midsection. Even without words, Blake understood. Whatever this being was, it was starving. He hesitated only for a moment before making a decision that would alter the course of not just his life, but potentially the relationship between two species. "You need help," he said, kneeling down to the creature's level. "And I'm not the type to leave anyone hungry, human, or whatever you are." The alien child, for that's what Blake assumed it was, tilted its head, those extraordinary eyes studying him intently. "I'm Blake," he said, pointing to himself. "Blake Turner. And I'm going to help you." When the creature didn't flee or attack, Blake slowly reached into his backpack and pulled out his dinner, a simple sandwich wrapped in wax paper. He unwrapped it and offered half to the alien. "Not sure if you can eat this, but it's worth a try." The alien sniffed at the sandwich, then delicately took it with slender, four-fingered hands. After a moment's hesitation, it took a tiny bite. Its eyes widened, and then it began to devour the food with startling speed. "Whoa, slow down there, buddy. You'll make yourself sick." Blake smiled despite himself. Some behaviors, it seemed, were universal. As the alien ate, Blake noticed more details. What he'd taken for clothing was actually part of its body, a sort of exoskeleton that covered portions of its torso and limbs. Around its neck hung what appeared to be a medallion, engraved with symbols Blake couldn't begin to decipher. When the sandwich was gone, the alien's glow brightened noticeably. It made a sound that Blake could have sworn was a sigh of satisfaction. "So," Blake said, settling back on his heels. "What now? Are your parents around?" You're a spaceship? How'd you end up behind a high school dumpster? The alien reached out and touched Blake's hand. The sensation was odd, like touching cool silk charged with static electricity. Suddenly, a jumble of images flashed through Blake's mind. A vessel moving through space, an explosion, a small pod hurtling toward Earth, fear, confusion, hunger. Blake gasped and pulled his hand away. You can show me things? With your mind? The alien nodded, the motion surprisingly human. Okay, so you crashed. You're stranded. Blake ran a hand through his hair. And I'm guessing you can't just call home for a pickup. The alien's shoulders slumped, confirming Blake's assessment. Blake looked up at the darkening sky, then back at the strange child before him. He knew what Sarah would have done without hesitation. Well, I can't leave you here. How about you come home with me? We'll figure something out in the morning. The alien's eyes widened again, and its glow brightened even further. I'll take that as a yes, Blake said, standing up. But we need to be careful. I don't think everyone would be as understanding. He took off his jacket and held it out. Put this on. It'll hide some of your glow. The alien allowed Blake to drape the jacket over its shoulders. The garment engulfed its small frame, but it did diminish the telltale luminescence. Now, let's get to my truck without anyone seeing us, okay? The journey across the parking lot felt like the longest walk of Blake's life. Every shadow seemed to conceal a witness. Every distant car sound made him flinch. But they reached his pickup without incident, and Blake helped the alien into the passenger seat. Seatbelt, he said automatically, then chuckled at himself. Though I'm not sure the Highway Patrol has regulations for extraterrestrial passengers. As they drove through town, Blake kept glancing at his unusual companion. The alien was pressed against the window, watching the passing buildings and streetlights with evident fascination. You know, Blake said, more to fill the silence than anything else. I always thought if aliens visited Earth, they'd land at the White House or some military base. Not behind Millfield High School. The alien turned to him and made a series of musical sounds. I have no idea what you're saying, Blake said, but I'm going to assume it was profound. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to Blake's modest single-story house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, 3 bedrooms, 2 of which he never used, a small kitchen, and a living room with a TV that was probably older than some of his students. But it was home. Well, this is it, Blake said as he unlocked the front door. Casa de Turner. Not exactly a 5-star hotel, but it's safe. He flicked on the lights and watched as the alien took in its surroundings. The creature seemed particularly interested in the family photos on the wall. Blake and Sarah on their wedding day at the Grand Canyon, in the backyard with their dog Max, who had passed a year before Sarah. That's my wife, Blake said softly. Sarah, she's not here anymore. The alien turned to look at him, and Blake had the distinct impression it understood exactly what he meant. Anyway, he said, clearing his throat, you must be hungry still. Let's see what we've got in the kitchen. Over the next hour, Blake offered various foods to his guest, discovering through trial and error what the alien could and couldn't eat. Fruits were a hit, particularly apples and oranges. Bread was acceptable. Milk prompted a reaction that Blake interpreted as the universal expression of disgust. Chocolate, however, produced what could only be described as extraterrestrial ecstasy. The alien's entire body glowed so brightly after one bite of a candy bar that Blake had to close all the blinds for fear the neighbors would notice. If I'd known chocolate was intergalactic currency, I'd have stocked up, Blake joked. After the impromptu feast, the question of sleeping arrangements arose. Blake made up the couch with blankets and pillows, then demonstrated lying down and closing his eyes. You sleep, right? Or do you just power down or something? The alien seemed to understand and climbed onto the couch, pulling the blankets around itself until only those large, curious eyes were visible. Okay then, I'll be just down the hall if you need anything. Try not to, I don't know, teleport around the house or anything while I'm asleep. As Blake turned to leave, the alien made a soft sound. He looked back to see it touching the medallion around its neck, then extending its hand toward him. You want me to take that? Blake asked, pointing to the medallion. The alien shook its head and tapped the medallion again, then pointed to Blake's chest. It's important to you? It means something? The alien nodded vigorously. Well, it's safe here with you. No one's going to take it. Blake smiled reassuringly. Get some rest. We'll figure out what to do tomorrow. In his bedroom, Blake sat on the edge of his bed, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. He had an alien in his living room. An actual, real-life extraterrestrial being. He should be calling someone. The police, the military, NASA, somebody. But something held him back. The fear he'd seen in those eyes, the simple gratitude for food and shelter, it was all too human. What would you do, Sarah? He whispered to the empty room. He could almost hear her response. You'd help any lost child, Blake. This one just happens to be from a lot further away. With that thought, he lay down and, surprisingly, fell asleep almost immediately. Blake dreamed of stars and distant worlds, of ships that sailed the void between galaxies, and of a society so advanced and yet so familiar. When he woke the next morning, he had the strange sensation that the dreams weren't entirely his own. He found the alien awake, standing at the living room window and staring at the sunrise with what appeared to be wonder. Morning, Blake said. Sleep well. The alien turned and made a series of musical notes that somehow conveyed affirmation. Glad to hear it. Or, not actually hear it, but you know what I mean. Blake headed to the kitchen. Breakfast. After another meal, during which Blake discovered that the alien had a particular fondness for strawberry jam, he sat down to consider their options. Okay, so you're stranded here. You've got no way to contact your people, and I'm guessing you'd like to go home eventually? The alien's response was a complex mixture of sounds and expressions that Blake couldn't fully interpret. This would be a lot easier if we could properly communicate, Blake muttered. The alien seemed to consider this, then pointed to the television. TV? You want to watch TV? Blake picked up the remote and turned it on. The morning news flickered to life, showing a reporter standing in a field not far from town. Residents report unusual lights in the sky last night, the reporter was saying. Local authorities have yet to comment, but amateur footage appears to show what some are calling a meteor, while others insist it was something more unusual. The screen showed a shaky cell phone video of a streak of light descending from the sky. That's you, isn't it? Blake asked. That's your ship, or pod, or whatever. The alien nodded, then pointed more urgently at the screen. What? What is it? The alien touched its medallion, then gestured at the TV again, mimicking the action of typing on a keyboard. You want to use the TV? To communicate. Another nod, more emphatic this time. I don't think that's how TVs work, buddy. But, Blake glanced at the dusty laptop on his desk. Maybe we can try something else. He retrieved the laptop and opened a basic text editor. Here, can you type? The alien studied the keyboard with intense concentration, then slowly extended a finger and pressed a key. The letter O appeared on the screen. The alien's eyes widened with excitement. That's it. Go ahead, try to write something. For the next few minutes, the alien experimented with the keyboard, growing faster and more confident with each keystroke. Finally, it typed. Thank you for help. I am Ilias. My ship crashed. Need to call home. Ilias? That's your name? Blake asked. The alien, Ilias, nodded. Well, it's nice to officially meet you, Ilias. And you're welcome for the help. But I'm not sure how to help you call home. Do you need a special device or something? Ilias typed again, medallion is beacon. Need power. Much power. Your medallion is a distress beacon, and you need power to activate it. Blake considered this. How much power are we talking about? Because I don't think my phone charger is going to cut it. More than house. Like city power. City power? You need to tap into the electrical grid. Blake frowned. That's going to be a problem. I can't exactly walk into the power plant and ask to plug in your alien jewelry. Ilias's expression fell, the glow around its body dimming noticeably. Hey, don't give up, Blake said, patting Ilias's shoulder awkwardly. We'll figure something out. I promise. Just then, Blake's phone rang. The caller ID showed Millfield High. I need to take this, he told Ilias, stepping into the kitchen. "Hello, Blake, it's Principal Harris. Are you coming in today?" Blake glanced at his watch and swore under his breath. It was already past 8 a.m. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'm not feeling well this morning. I should have called earlier." "This isn't like you, Blake. You haven't missed a day in 3 years." "I know, sir. It's a sudden thing. I think it might be food poisoning." A sigh came through the phone. "All right. Take care of yourself. I'll have Thompson cover your duties today." "Thank you, sir. I should be back tomorrow." Blake ended the call and returned to the living room. Ilias had typed a new message. "I caused trouble for you. Sorry." No, it's fine," Blake assured him. "I've got plenty of sick days saved up. Right now, figuring out how to help you is more important than mopping hallways." Ilias typed, "Why help me? Not your kind." The question caught Blake off guard. "Why?" "Well, because you needed help. Does there need to be another reason?" Ilias studied him with those penetrating indigo eyes, then typed, "Your kind interesting. Stories say humans dangerous, violent. But you different." "I'm not different," Blake said. "I mean, sure, some humans can be dangerous. But most of us just want to live our lives, take care of our families, help others when we can. Basic decent stuff. More stories of human wars than human kindness." "Why?" Blake laughed. "Well, war makes for more exciting stories, I guess. Human shares sandwich doesn't exactly make the galactic news." Ilias seemed to consider this, then typed, "Important lesson." "Thank you." "You're welcome. Now, about your beacon problem." A sudden pounding on the front door interrupted him. Blake froze. "Were you expecting company?" he whispered, then realized the absurdity of the question. He peered through the peephole to see his neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, a well-meaning but nosy woman in her 70s. "Blake Turner, I know you're in there. I saw your truck in the driveway when you should be at work." Blake turned to Ilias in panic. "Hide. Quickly. In the bedroom." As Ilias scurried down the hall, Blake composed himself and opened the door a crack. "Morning, Mrs. Abernathy. What can I do for you? Are you ill, dear? I was concerned when I saw your truck. Just a touch of food poisoning. Nothing serious." Mrs. Abernathy's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "I saw your lights on all night, and the strangest glow coming from your windows. Like nothing I've ever seen before." Blake's heart hammered in his chest. "Must have been the TV. I fell asleep with it on." She didn't seem convinced. "And those noises? Like music, but not quite right. I've been trying some new meditation techniques. For stress. The sounds are part of it." "Well," Mrs. Abernathy said, "if you need anything, soup, medicine, you just let me know." "Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy. I appreciate it." As soon as she left, Blake closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. "That was close," he called out. "You can come out now." Ilias emerged from the bedroom, looking contrite. "We need to be more careful," Blake said. "And we need to solve your beacon problem before anyone else gets suspicious." They spent the morning brainstorming options. The local power plant was too well secured. Solar power wouldn't generate enough energy. The high school's backup generator was a possibility, but still insufficient according to Ilias. Around noon, Blake had an idea. What about the county fair? It starts today just outside of town. They bring in huge generators to power all the rides and lights. Would that work? Ilias considered this, then typed, "Maybe. Need C generators. We'll have to disguise you somehow," Blake said, looking critically at his extraterrestrial guest. "You're a bit too glowy for public appearance." After some experimentation, they settled on a disguise: sunglasses to hide Ilias's distinctive eyes, a hooded sweatshirt to conceal the crystalline crest, gloves for the four-fingered hands, and several layers of clothing to mask the glow. The result wasn't perfect. Ilias looked like a child bundled up for a blizzard on a warm autumn day, but it would have to do. "Remember," Blake instructed as they prepared to leave, "no sounds, no touching anyone, and stay close to me. If anyone asks, you're my nephew, visiting from out of town." Ilias nodded solemnly. The county fair was busy but not crowded, which worked in their favor. Blake bought tickets at the entrance, where the teenage attendant barely glanced at them. As they made their way through the fairgrounds, Blake couldn't help but notice how Ilias reacted to everything around them. The colorful tints, the aroma of fried foods, the sounds of music and laughter. Despite the gravity of their mission, there was something endearing about witnessing someone experience a county fair for the first time. The generators should be behind the main stage, Blake said, guiding Ilias through the crowd. We just need to find a way to get back there without anyone stopping us. As they approached the stage area, Blake spotted a security guard checking passes. This might be trickier than I thought. Ilias tugged on his sleeve and pointed to a food vendor wearing a laminated badge. Good eye, Blake said. But where are we going to get passes like that? Ilias pointed to a stack of badges sitting on a table near an unattended service entrance. Okay, that works. Wait here, behind this tent. I'll be right back. Blake casually walked over to the table, glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then grabbed 2 vendor badges. He returned to Ilias and slipped one around the alien's neck. Now we look like we belong here. Let's go. They made their way to the service area behind the main stage. The space was a maze of cables, equipment, and bustling workers. In the far corner, Blake spotted what they were looking for, 3 massive generators humming with power. There they are, he whispered to Ilias. Will those work? Ilias studied the generators, then gave a slight nod. Great. Now we just need to figure out how to connect your medallion to them without anyone noticing. As they stood there contemplating their next move, a gruff voice called out from behind them. Hey, what are you doing back here? Blake turned to see a burly man in a utility vest approaching them. We're, checking the power output, Blake improvised. For the sound system. Sound team's already done that, the man said suspiciously. Who sent you? Mr. Johnson, Blake said, naming the high school's principal on impulse. The man's eyes narrowed. There's no Johnson working this event. I meant Jackson. Mr. Jackson. From the county office. Uh-huh. The man wasn't buying it. Let me see some real ID. Blake felt a tug on his sleeve. Ilias was pointing urgently at something behind the generators. Following the alien's gaze, Blake spotted an emergency exit. You know what? You're right. We shouldn't be here. We'll just go report back to Mr. Jackson that everything looks good. Before the man could respond, Blake grabbed Ilias's hand and darted toward the exit. They burst through the door into the afternoon sunlight, a shout of protest following them. Run, Blake said, and they sprinted away from the fairgrounds, not stopping until they reached the parking lot where Blake had left his truck. Well, that didn't go as planned, Blake said as they climbed into the vehicle. I'm sorry, Ilias. I thought we could make it work. Ilias sat quietly for a moment, then removed the sunglasses. Those indigo eyes fixed on Blake with an expression that somehow conveyed both gratitude and determination. Then the alien began to type on the phone Blake had given him for easier communication. Thank you for trying. New plan. Medallion can store power slowly. Need time. How much time? Days. Maybe week. Blake nodded slowly. Okay, we can work with that. You can stay with me as long as you need to. We'll charge your medallion little by little. As they drove home, Blake found himself reflecting on the strange turn his life had taken. Yesterday, he'd been a lonely janitor going through the motions of existence. Today, he was harboring an alien fugitive and plotting to power up an interstellar distress beacon. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and somehow the most alive he'd felt since Sarah died. Back at the house, they connected the medallion to a power strip, which Ilias assured him would work, albeit slowly. As evening fell, they sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. You know, Blake said, I've lived here my whole life, and I don't think I've really looked at the sunset in years. Not properly. Ilias made a soft, musical sound that seemed to express understanding. When Sarah was alive, we used to sit out here almost every evening. She loved this time of day. Blake smiled at the memory. She would have loved meeting you, too. She always believed there was more out there. Used to read all those science fiction books, watch all the space movies. I'd tease her about it. Ilias pointed to the sky, now darkening to reveal the first stars of the night. Yeah, she was right all along. Blake chuckled. Don't tell her I admitted that. If you happen to run into her out there somewhere. They sat in companionable silence as more stars appeared. Eventually, Blake pointed to a particularly bright one. Is that where you're from? One of those stars. Ilias shook his head and typed on the phone. Too far to see from here. Many galaxies away. Many galaxies? That's incredible. How did you even get here? Ship, very fast. Been space. Hard to explain. I bet. And what were you doing all the way out here? Exploration. Learning mission. Accident happened. So you're like a student? On a field trip gone wrong. Ilias considered this, then typed. Yes. Good comparison. And your people? What are they like? Ilias's expression grew animated as he typed. Peaceful. Curious. Very old civilization. Value knowledge and harmony. They sound nice. Better than humans in a lot of ways. Not better. Different. Humans have things we admire. Like what? Passion. Creativity. Resilience. Chocolate. Blake laughed. Well, we did get chocolate right, I'll give us that. As the night deepened around them, Blake found himself sharing more about his life, his childhood in Millfield, meeting Sarah in high school, their dreams of traveling that never quite materialized, the cancer that took her too young, his quiet existence since then. Ilias listened with an attention that felt more genuine than anything Blake had experienced in years. In return, Ilias shared glimpses of a world Blake could barely comprehend, cities that floated among the clouds, oceans of liquid crystal, festivals of light that lasted for what Earth would consider months. The more they communicated, the more Blake realized that despite the vast differences between them, there were fundamental similarities too. The desire for connection, for understanding, for home. It's getting late, Blake said eventually. We should go in. As they stood to enter the house, a bright light suddenly illuminated the yard. Blake froze, thinking for one wild moment that it was a spotlight from a police helicopter or military vehicle. But the light was coming from above, far above. Are those your people? He asked, a mixture of hope and unexpected sadness welling up inside him. Ilias shook his head, eyes wide with what Blake now recognized as fear. The alien typed rapidly, not my people. Different. Dangerous. Inside quickly. They hurried into the house, Blake closing all blinds and curtains. Who are they? What do they want? Hunters. Collectors. Want specimens. Want me. Specimens? You mean they take beings from other planets? Like some kind of space poachers? Yes. Very bad. Medallion not ready. Not enough power to call home. Blake peered through a gap in the curtains. The light in the sky had moved closer, revealing itself to be a craft unlike anything he'd ever seen. Sleek, predatory, and undeniably alien. They must have tracked your pod, Blake said. How long before your medallion has enough power to signal your people? Days still. Too long. Blake watched as the craft began a slow, searching pattern over the town. A cold certainty settled in his gut. They're going to find you here, aren't they? Ilias nodded grimly. Then we need to move. Get somewhere safe until your beacon is charged. Blake began gathering essentials, food, water, his camping gear from the garage. I have a cabin. Well, it was Sarah's family's cabin. Up in the mountains, about 3 hours from here. No electricity, but it's isolated. They might not find us there. Ilias's eyes widened, and he typed, You risk much for me. Why? Blake paused in his preparations. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I'm not ready to say goodbye yet. Come on, we need to hurry. They loaded Blake's truck as quickly and quietly as possible. Just as they were about to leave, Blake had a thought. He ran back inside and grabbed the photo of him and Sarah from the wall. For luck, he explained when he returned to the truck. As they pulled away from the house, Blake saw the alien craft descending toward town. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Hold on, Ilias. This might get interesting. The road to the mountains was deserted at this late hour, for which Blake was grateful. He kept checking his rearview mirror, half expecting to see the alien craft in pursuit, but the night sky remained clear. I think we might have gotten away, he said as they began to climb into the foothills. Ilias, however, didn't appear convinced. The alien kept looking back, the glow around its body dimmed to almost nothing, a state Blake had come to recognize as the equivalent of fear or distress. "Hey, it's going to be okay," Blake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Those hunters don't know about the cabin. No one does, really. Not anymore." Ilias typed on the phone. "They have technology. Can track energy signature." "Your energy signature? Like the way you glow?" "Yes. Different from Earth energy. They scan for it." "Well, that complicates things." Blake thought for a moment. "Is there any way to mask it? Hide it somehow?" Ilias considered this, then typed, "Water. Deep water block signature." "Water? The cabin's near a lake. Would that work?" "Maybe. If deep enough." They drove in tense silence for the next hour, the road becoming increasingly winding and narrow as they ascended into the mountains. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating dense forest on either side. "Almost there," Blake said as they turned onto a barely visible dirt track. "Just a few more miles." The cabin appeared suddenly, a small, rustic structure nestled among towering pines. It had been years since Blake had visited, not since the summer before Sarah's diagnosis. The place held too many memories. "It's not much," he said as they got out of the truck. "No running water, just a pump. No electricity either. But it's shelter." Ilias didn't seem concerned about the accommodations. The alien was scanning the night sky anxiously. Inside, the cabin was dusty but otherwise unchanged. A main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and 2 bedrooms. Blake lit a kerosene lamp, casting warm, flickering light across the wooden walls. "You take the bedroom on the right," he told Ilias. "I'll get a fire going." While Ilias explored the cabin, Blake built a fire in the fireplace, the familiar task calming his frayed nerves. As the flames grew, casting dancing shadows around the room, he allowed himself to believe, just for a moment, that they might be safe here. That belief was shattered by a sound from outside, a high-pitched hum that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the cabin. "They found us," Blake whispered. Ilias rushed to the window, then typed frantically, "Ship coming. Must hide." "The lake," Blake said, grabbing the medallion that was still slowly charging from a portable battery pack. "You said deep water would block your signature, right?" "Yes, but..." "No buts. We need to go. Now." They raced from the cabin toward the lake, which lay about 100 yards through the trees. The humming grew louder, and suddenly the forest was illuminated by a harsh, searching light from above. "Almost there," Blake urged as they reached the shore. The lake stretched before them, dark and still under the night sky. Ilias hesitated at the water's edge, typing, "Cannot swim well. Water not natural for my kind." "I'll help you," Blake promised. "Just hold on to me." The light was moving closer, systematically sweeping the area. They were running out of time. "Trust me," Blake said, extending his hand. Ilias looked at him with those extraordinary eyes, then took his hand. Together, they waded into the cold water. "We need to get to the deepest part," Blake said. "There's an underwater shelf about 20 yards out. The lake drops off there. That's where we'll hide." The water reached their waists, then their chests. Ilias was struggling, the alien's body not built for aquatic movement. Blake supported him as best he could. "Just a little further," he encouraged. They reached the drop-off just as the searchlights swept over the lake's surface. Blake took a deep breath. "Now we dive. Ready?" Ilias nodded, gripping Blake's arm tightly. 3, 2, 1. They submerged into the cold darkness. Blake felt Ilias tense beside him, but kept pulling them both deeper. The medallion around Ilias's neck began to glow, providing an eerie blue light that illuminated the underwater world around them. Blake's lungs began to burn. He hadn't had time to prepare properly for a long dive. Just when he thought he couldn't hold his breath any longer, he felt Ilias touch his face. Something changed, the burning in his lungs eased, and he realized with shock that he could suddenly breathe underwater. Panic gave way to wonder as Blake realized that Ilias had somehow shared his ability to extract oxygen from water. They stayed submerged, watching through the rippling surface as the searchlight passed over the lake once, twice, 3 times. Eventually, the humming sound faded, and the forest returned to darkness. Blake gestured upward, and they swam to the surface, breaking through with twin gasps. "That was incredible," Blake said between breaths. "How did you do that?" "The breathing thing." Ilias typed with wet fingers. "Temporary adaptation. Gift from my people. Emergency use." "Well, it definitely qualifies as an emergency." "Thank you." Blake looked toward the shore. "I think they're gone, but we should stay out here a while longer, just to be safe." They found a fallen log near the shore where they could sit partially submerged, hidden by overhanging branches. As they waited, Blake couldn't help but marvel at the bizarre turn his life had taken. "You know," he said quietly, "before I met you, I was just existing, going through the motions. After Sarah died, I kind of shut down. Same routine, day after day. Nothing changing, nothing new." He looked up at the stars. "And now I'm hiding in a lake from alien hunters with an extraterrestrial kid. Sarah would have loved this." Ilias typed, "You miss her very much." "Every day," Blake admitted. "But this adventure, it's the first time in years I've felt like I'm actually living again. Isn't that strange?" "Not strange. Purpose gives meaning. Helping others gives joy." Blake smiled. "Pretty wise for a kid. Not kid by my people's standards. Adolescent. Like your teenagers." "That explains the appetite," Blake joked. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the night sky. After about an hour, Blake's teeth began to chatter. "I think it's safe to go back now," he said. "And I'm freezing." They made their way back to shore and returned to the cabin, where Blake rekindled the fire and they dried off as best they could. "So what's the plan now?" Blake asked. "We can't stay here forever, and I don't think those hunters are going to give up easily." Ilias considered this, then typed, "Medallion needs more power. Faster charging. The portable battery is too slow, huh?" Blake frowned. "There's no electricity here, and I don't think it would be enough anyway, based on what you said before." Ilias nodded, then typed thoughtfully, "There is way. Dangerous. More dangerous than alien hunters?" "I'm listening. Hunters have power source. Very strong. Could use their ship." Blake stared at Ilias. "You want to steal power from the people trying to capture you?" "Yes. Ironic, but effective." "That's crazy," Blake said. Then he grinned. "I like it. But how would we even get near their ship? And wouldn't they detect you as soon as you got close?" Ilias typed, "They search for my signature." "But you human. No signature. So you're saying I should go alone? How would I even know what to do with their technology?" "I guide you. Through Medallion. Temporary connection." Blake considered this. It was risky, beyond risky, but if it worked, Ilias could signal his people and go home. The alternative was to keep running until they were inevitably caught. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's do it. But we need to find their ship first." They spent the rest of the night planning. Ilias explained how the hunters operated. They would establish a base camp, likely somewhere isolated but with a good vantage point. The ship would need to remain relatively accessible for quick deployment. "There's a clearing about 2 miles from here," Blake said, "on top of the ridge. It would give them a view of the whole valley." When dawn broke, they set out to do reconnaissance. Blake carried a pair of old binoculars that had belonged to Sarah's father, while Ilias stayed hidden in the truck, the medallion still connected to the portable battery. Blake hiked up to a vantage point opposite the ridge and scanned the area with the binoculars. Sure enough, there it was, a craft unlike anything he'd ever seen, sleek and predatory, sitting in the clearing exactly where he'd predicted. "Found them," he reported when he returned to the truck. "You were right about them setting up camp somewhere with a good view." They spent the day refining their plan. Ilias drew diagrams of what the ship's power core might look like and practiced establishing the mental link that would guide Blake through the process. By evening, they were ready. "So I'll approach from the north side," Blake reviewed. "You said their sensors are weakest there. I'll wait until the main hunting party leaves. You think that'll be around midnight?" Ilias nodded. "Hunt at night. 3 crews stay with ship. And I'll be able to get past them because ship has blind spots." We'll guide you. Right. Blake took a deep breath. And once I'm inside, I connect the medallion to their power core, wait for it to charge fully, then get out before they notice. Exactly. Simple. Nothing simple about it, Blake muttered. But it's our best shot. As night fell, they drove as close as they dared to the ridge. Then Blake continued on foot, carrying the medallion and a backpack with basic supplies. Ilias had to stay behind. Getting too close to the hunter's ship would risk detection. Be careful, Blake said as he prepared to leave. Stay hidden. If I'm not back by dawn. Ilias touched his arm, those indigo eyes conveying what words couldn't. The alien typed one last message. You brave human. Thank you. Save the thanks for when we pull this off, Blake said with more confidence than he felt. See you soon. The hike to the ridge was arduous in the dark, but Blake had spent enough summers in these mountains to navigate by the stars. As he approached the clearing, he could see the alien ship more clearly. It reminded him of a manta ray, all sleek curves and deadly purpose. Lights pulsed along its hull, and what appeared to be weapons protruded from various points. Blake crouched in the underbrush, watching. Just as Ilias had predicted, a group of figures emerged from the ship around midnight. They were tall, heavily armored, and moved with predatory grace. Blake counted 6 of them as they disappeared into the forest, presumably to continue their search. 3 left inside, he whispered to himself. Just like Ilias said. He waited another 15 minutes to ensure the hunting party was gone, then slipped the medallion around his neck. Immediately, he felt a strange sensation, like a gentle pressure at the base of his skull. Ilias was connecting with him, just as they practiced. I hope this works, Blake murmured, then began his approach. The ship loomed larger as he drew near, its surface gleaming in the moonlight. Blake could feel Ilias guiding him, nudging his awareness toward a particular section of the hull that appeared no different from the rest to his human eyes. When he reached the ship, Blake placed his hand on the spot Ilias indicated. Nothing happened for a moment. Then a seam appeared in the seemingly solid surface, widening into an opening just large enough for him to slip through. Inside, the ship was a maze of corridors lit by an eerie purple glow. Blake moved cautiously, following Ilias's mental guidance. Twice he had to duck into recesses as crew members passed by, stocky, reptilian beings with elaborate crests and eyes that glinted with cold intelligence. The power core was located in the center of the ship, a pulsating sphere of energy contained within a transparent chamber. It hummed with power, sending ripples of light throughout the surrounding room. Now what? Blake whispered. The medallion grew warm against his chest, and knowledge that wasn't his own flooded his mind. Instructions, diagrams, procedures. Blake's hands moved almost of their own accord, manipulating controls he couldn't have possibly understood otherwise. A panel slid open, revealing a complex array of crystalline structures. Blake removed the medallion from around his neck and placed it in a depression that seemed made for it. The medallion began to glow, brighter and brighter, drawing power from the ship's core. Blake watched nervously, aware that every second increased the risk of discovery. The medallion's glow intensified, reaching a brightness that forced him to shield his eyes. Just when he thought it couldn't get any brighter, the light stabilized. Is it done? He whispered. The sense of completion flooded his mind. Yes, the medallion was fully charged. Blake reached for it, then froze as a harsh voice barked something in an alien language. He turned to see one of the crew members standing in the doorway, weapon raised. The creature spoke again, gesturing with its weapon for Blake to step away from the power core. Blake raised his hand slowly, mind racing. The mental connection with Ilias was fading now that the medallion's charge was complete. Look, Blake said, knowing the alien couldn't understand him but hoping his tone would convey his meaning. I don't want any trouble. I'm just going to take this and leave, okay? The alien growled and advanced a step. Behind it, Blake could see movement. The other crew members, alerted to the intruder. In a desperate move, Blake lunged for the medallion, snatching it from its housing. Alarms blared throughout the ship as the power core fluctuated wildly. The alien fired its weapon, but Blake was already diving behind a console. Energy blasts impacted around him, sending showers of sparks cascading across the room. The ship shuddered, systems destabilizing from the abrupt removal of the medallion. Blake scrambled toward the exit, the medallion clutched tightly in his hand. More shots followed him, one grazing his shoulder with searing heat. He gasped in pain, but kept moving. The corridors were chaos now, emergency lights flashing, alarm sounds blaring. Blake ran blindly, no longer guided by Ilias, relying solely on his memory of the path in. He rounded a corner and found himself face to face with another crew member. Before the alien could react, Blake barreled into it, sending them both crashing to the floor. The medallion flew from his grasp, sliding across the smooth surface. Blake scrambled after it, fingers closing around the precious object just as the alien recovered. A clawed hand seized his ankle, dragging him backward. Blake kicked out desperately, his foot connecting with something solid. The grip loosened, and he was free again, sprinting toward where he thought the exit should be. By some miracle, he found it. The seam in the hull, now wider due to the ship's systems malfunctioning. Blake squeezed through, tumbling onto the ground outside. Behind him, the ship was pulsing erratically, sections of its hull rippling as if in distress. Blake didn't wait to see more. He ran, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, the medallion's glow lighting his way through the dark forest. He could hear pursuit, crashing sounds and alien calls, but he had a head start and knew the terrain. For nearly an hour he ran, doubling back, crossing streams to mask his trail, using every trick he'd learned from a lifetime of exploring these mountains. Finally, confident he'd lost his pursuers, he made his way back to where he'd left the truck and Ilias. The alien was waiting anxiously, practically leaping from the vehicle when Blake emerged from the trees. "Got it," Blake gasped, holding up the medallion. Fully charged. Ilias's eyes widened at the sight of Blake's injured shoulder. "It's just a graze," Blake assured him. "I'll be fine. But we need to move. Those hunters aren't going to be happy about what I did to their ship." They drove back to the cabin, where Blake treated his wound as best he could while Ilias examined the medallion. "So what now?" Blake asked. "You can signal your people, right?" Ilias nodded, typing, "Yes. Beacon ready. But signal takes time to reach home." "How long?" "Hours. Maybe day." "And the hunters? Will they be able to track the signal?" "Yes. We'll know location when activated." Blake considered this. "So we need somewhere safe to activate the beacon. Somewhere we can defend until your people arrive." They debated options throughout the night. The cabin was too isolated. If the hunters found them, there would be no help, no witnesses. Returning to town risked civilian casualties if the hunters attacked. Finally, as dawn broke, Blake had an idea. "The high school," he said. "It's built like a fortress, concrete walls, limited entry points. It's on high ground with good visibility in all directions. And it'll be empty for the weekend." Ilias seemed uncertain. "Risk to your world. Your people." "We're past the point of keeping this quiet," Blake said. "When your people's ships arrive, everyone's going to know about aliens anyway. Better to make our stand somewhere defensible." They set out immediately, taking back roads to avoid detection. The morning sun was climbing high when they reached Millfield High School. Blake used his keys to let them in, then secured all entrances except the main doors. "We'll set up in the gymnasium," he decided. High ceiling, good sight lines, minimal windows. In the gym, Ilias prepared the medallion while Blake gathered anything that might serve as a weapon or barricade: sports equipment, tools from the maintenance closet, furniture. "Okay," Blake said when they were ready. "Let's call your ride." Ilias placed the medallion in the center of the basketball court. It began to pulse with light, sending a beam straight up that somehow passed through the solid ceiling without damaging it. "Now we wait," Blake said, settling beside Ilias on the bleachers. The wait was shorter than expected. Less than an hour later, they heard vehicles arriving outside, not alien craft, but human ones. Blake peered through a window to see police cars and what looked like government vehicles surrounding the school. They must have detected the signal, he said. Or maybe someone saw the light. A voice came over a megaphone. This is Sheriff Tompkins. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Blake looked at Ilias. Should we surrender? They might protect us from the hunters. Ilias hesitated, then typed. Not sure. Humans fear unknown. Might treat me as threat. You're right, Blake admitted. But they're not going away. Let me talk to them. Stay here with the beacon. Despite Ilias's protests, Blake made his way to the main entrance. He opened the door slowly, hands raised. It's just me, Blake Turner, he called out. I work here. I'm the janitor. Sheriff Tompkins approached cautiously, hand on his holster. Blake, what the hell is going on? We've got reports of strange lights, and now this beam coming from the school. It's complicated, Sheriff. I'm helping someone. Someone not from around here. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. You mean like an illegal alien? Because that's a federal. No, Blake interrupted. I mean not from this planet. There was a moment of stunned silence, then nervous laughter from some of the deputies. The sheriff, however, didn't laugh. You serious, Blake? Because we've had reports all week. Lights in the sky. Strange occurrences. I'm serious. And there are others coming. Hunters. Dangerous ones. They're looking for my friend, and they won't care who gets in their way. Before the sheriff could respond, a deputy shouted and pointed to the sky. A ship, similar to the one Blake had infiltrated but smaller, was descending rapidly toward the school. Get back, Blake yelled. Everyone take cover. Chaos erupted as officers scrambled for their vehicles. The sheriff grabbed Blake's arm. What is that thing? The hunters I told you about. They're here for my friend. You need to evacuate the area. Get everyone out of range. To his credit, the sheriff didn't waste time arguing. He began barking orders into his radio, organizing a perimeter and calling for backup. Blake ran back inside, finding Ilias still in the gym, watching the beacon anxiously. The hunters are here, Blake said. And now the police know too. Things are about to get complicated. They didn't have long to wait. The building shuddered as something landed on the roof. Then came sounds of forced entry, breaking glass, splintering doors. They're inside, Blake whispered, gripping a baseball bat tightly. Stay behind me. The gymnasium doors burst open, and 3 hunter aliens strode in, tall, armored figures with reptilian features and cold, calculating eyes. They carried weapons Blake recognized from the ship, sleek devices that hummed with energy. The lead hunter spoke, the sounds unintelligible to Blake, but clearly threatening. Ilias stepped forward, responding in the same language. The exchange grew heated, the hunters gesturing at the beacon, then at Blake. What are they saying? Blake asked. Ilias typed quickly, want medallion. Want me? Say we'll kill you if resist. Tell them that's not happening. As Ilias translated, the lead hunter's expression darkened. It raised its weapon, aiming directly at Blake. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Ilias leaped in front of Blake as the hunter fired. The energy blast struck the alien child squarely in the chest, sending him flying backward into Blake's arms. No, Blake cried, cradling Ilias's limp form. The blue glow that normally surrounded the alien was flickering weakly. Rage unlike anything Blake had ever known surged through him. With a roar, he charged the nearest hunter, swinging the baseball bat with all his strength. The alien, surprised by the ferocity of the attack, failed to dodge in time. The bat connected with its head with a sickening crunch, sending the creature staggering. The other hunters raised their weapons, but before they could fire, a new sound filled the air, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of reality. The beacon was pulsing more rapidly now, the beam intensifying. The hunters hesitated, looking up. Blake followed their gaze to see the ceiling of the gymnasium seemingly dissolve, revealing the sky above, now filled with ships unlike either the beacon or the hunter's craft. These were graceful, organic-looking vessels that shimmered with an inner light. One by one, the new ships landed in the school grounds outside. The hunters backed away, clearly alarmed by this development. Through the open doors, Blake saw figures emerging from the ships, being similar to Ilias but adult-sized, their crystalline crests more elaborate, their movements dignified and purposeful. They entered the gymnasium, dozens of them, surrounding the hunters who now appeared significantly less confident. One of the newcomers approached Blake, who still held Ilias protectively. The adult alien, clearly a leader of some sort, knelt beside them, placing a gentle hand on Ilias's chest. A soft glow transferred from the leader to Ilias, whose own light began to strengthen. Blake watched in wonder as Ilias stirred, those indigo eyes fluttering open. "You're okay," he whispered. "Your people are here." The leader turned to Blake, studying him intently. Then, to Blake's astonishment, it spoke in perfect English. "You protected our child at great risk to yourself." "What?" "He needed help," Blake said simply. "And then, he became my friend." The leader's expression, subtle but readable, showed surprise, then something like approval. "Most species would not have done what you did. Many would have turned him over to authorities, or worse, to the hunters for profit." "Maybe you've been meeting the wrong humans," Blake suggested. The leader made a sound that might have been laughter. "Perhaps we have." Outside, more ships were arriving, dozens, then hundreds of them, filling the sky over Millfield. The hunters were being escorted away by guards, their weapons confiscated. Ilias, now recovered enough to stand, embraced Blake tightly. "Thank you," he typed, his normal communication method seeming inadequate for the moment. "You're welcome," Blake said, fighting back tears. "I guess this is goodbye, huh?" Before Ilias could respond, the leader spoke again. "Blake Turner, your actions have revealed much about your species that our previous observations had missed. We had thought humans too violent, too unpredictable for formal contact. But perhaps we were hasty in that judgment." "We have our problems," Blake admitted. "But there's good in us too." "Indeed. Which is why I would like to offer you a proposition." "What kind of proposition?" "We wish to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. We need someone who understands both our peoples. Someone who has shown wisdom, courage, and compassion. Someone like you." Blake stared at the alien leader. "Me? I'm just a janitor." "You are far more than that," the leader said. "You saw value in a lost child when others might have seen only a threat or an opportunity. That is the mark of a true diplomat." Outside, the situation was escalating. Military vehicles had joined the police, and a helicopter circled overhead. News vans were arriving, reporters already broadcasting live footage of the alien ships. "Your world is about to change," the leader said. "The knowledge that you are not alone in the universe will transform your society. That transition will be easier with guidance from those who have helped other worlds through similar revelations." "And you want me to help with that?" Blake asked incredulously. "Yes, as our liaison to humanity. Of course, the choice is yours." Blake looked around, at the gymnasium where he'd spent countless hours cleaning floors and setting up for events, at Ilias who watched him hopefully, at the alien leader offering him a role he could never have imagined. "What about my life here?" he asked, though even as he spoke the words, he realized how little actually tied him to Millfield now. "You would divide your time between our world and yours," the leader explained. "Learning our ways, teaching us yours, helping to build a bridge between our civilizations." Ilias tugged at Blake's sleeve, typing excitedly, "Please say yes." "Would be wonderful." Blake thought of Sarah, of how she would have reacted to all this. She would have been first in line for a trip to an alien world. He could almost hear her voice. "Blake Turner, if you pass this up, I'll never forgive you." "Okay," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "I accept." The leader nodded solemnly. "Then let us meet your people properly." Together, they walked out of the gymnasium and through the main doors of the school. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Police, military personnel, media, and curious townspeople kept at bay by hastily established barricades. As Blake emerged with the aliens, a hush fell over the crowd. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, soldiers raised weapons uncertainly. Sheriff Tompkins broke the silence, stepping forward. "Blake, you want to explain what's going on?" Blake took a deep breath. "Sheriff, everyone, I'd like you to meet some new friends." They've come a long way, and they're interested in getting to know us better. The alien leader stepped forward. People of Earth, we come in peace and friendship. Your citizen, Blake Turner, has demonstrated the best qualities of humanity. We hope he is representative of your species as a whole. He is, called out a voice from the crowd. Blake recognized Mrs. Abernathy, his nosy neighbor. Blake's a good man. Always has been. If he says you're friends, that's good enough for me. Others voiced agreement, the initial fear giving way to curiosity and cautious optimism. Officials began organizing a more formal reception, though they seemed completely out of their depth. Throughout the chaos, Ilias remained by Blake's side, occasionally typing messages to help him navigate the cultural gaps. As the day progressed, more ships arrived, until the sky was filled with them, 300 in total, a flotilla of peaceful visitors from beyond the stars. That evening, as temporary accommodations were being arranged for the alien delegation, Blake found a moment alone with Ilias. "I still can't believe this is happening," he said. "Yesterday, I was mopping floors, and today I'm apparently an intergalactic diplomat." Ilias typed, "Not yesterday. Beginning when you shared food with starving child. Kindness most powerful force in universe." "Maybe," Blake conceded. "Or maybe I was just in the right place at the right time." Right place, right time, right heart. Blake smiled at that. "You know, when I saw all those ships lined up over my house this morning, I thought it was the end of the world. Turns out it was just the beginning of something new." Ilias typed, "Not Yendi. Never end. Just new chapter. Better chapter." As night fell over Millfield, lights from 300 alien ships transformed the small town into something magical. News outlets around the world broadcast images of the fleet, and speculation ran wild about what it meant for humanity's future. In the midst of it all, Blake Turner, no longer just a janitor, but now humanity's first ambassador to an advanced alien civilization, stood on the high school roof with Ilias, watching the stars that no longer seemed quite so distant. "So," Blake said, "when do we start?" Ilias gestured at the scene before them. The ships, the gathering of two species, the beginning of a new relationship between worlds. "Already have," the alien typed. "Already have." In the months that followed, Blake divided his time between Earth and Ilias's homeworld, learning their language and customs while teaching them about humanity. The diplomatic mission flourished, leading to exchanges of knowledge, culture, and technology that benefited both civilizations. Blake never returned to janitorial work, though he insisted that his new quarters, both on Earth and on the alien world, be modest and practical. "I was never meant for luxury," he explained when offered more lavish accommodations. "Just a simple life with purpose." The medallion that had served as a beacon now hung in a museum on Ilias's homeworld, alongside a simple Earth sandwich preserved in stasis. Symbols of how something as small as an act of kindness could forge connections across the stars. And on quiet evenings, when the diplomatic duties were done, Blake would often sit with Ilias, no longer a child but growing into the alien equivalent of a young adult, and share stories of Sarah, of Earth, of the strange twist of fate that had brought them together behind a high school dumpster. "You know," he said during one such evening, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't checked that strange light. If I'd just gone home like I planned." Ilias, now fluent in English, smiled. "Perhaps another human would have found me. Perhaps not. But I am grateful it was you, Blake Turner." "Me too, kid," Blake said, looking up at a sky that now held familiar constellations from two worlds. "Me too." And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.